Our president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, said he wasn't considering a pause on his plan to implement sweeping additional tariffs on dozens of countries despite outreach from trading partners so eager to avoid the levies, while still signaling he could be open to some negotiations. Well, after all, he is a deal maker. This is what he said. We're not looking at that, Trump said today, while meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office. Trump said tariffs were very important to his economic agenda and would generally remain while opening the door to fair deal and good deals with every country. There can be permanent tariffs, and there can also be negotiations, because there are things that we need beyond tariffs, is what the president went on to say. Joining us tonight to talk about this and so much more, Marcia Dyson. She's a Global Institute founder of the Women's Trade Bureau, former presidential candidate Steve Laffey, Populist, conservative, and Todd O'Neill, managing editor of the Daily Signal and author of Making Hate Pay. Welcome you all to the broadcast. Let me start with you, Ms. Dyson. Is this a gamble that will pay off, or is it too soon to tell? And what does history tell us? Because you consider yourself an economic historian. Talk to us.
No, I think it is too soon to tell. The president has been going on a very fast train with a whole lot of stops, and we don't know what kind of passengers he's picking up. But I do know, or I believe, that the reason for the sweeping of the tariffs at 10% is to basically level the playing field economically, and a real hard pushback on China. It's not only economical, it's also geopolitical, because if this goes wrong, then there's an opportunity or possibility that the other countries like Africa, Latin America, South Pacific countries might team up more with China, which would then impact us more economically as the tariffs that we're trying to level the playing field. So it might shift the U.S. trade standards as we know it, depending on how this all works out. I know he's known for the art of the deal. It might seem crazy when you're in that kind of economic war room with him, but I think that based on his past, when he says something, he does it, and he makes sure, though it seemed chaotic and crazy math or fuzzy math to us, that the end game will be resulting. But the tipping point is how will China really react to it, because they're the target actually of this tariff. With the 34%, they want to just limit us on limited things, where we want to push back on everything that they do, which can have an economical deficit for the consumers of this country as well.
You know, Steve Laffey, you're a man about business. You've built many successful businesses. J.P. Morgan's CEO, Jamie Dimon, tells us today that the president's tariffs will boost, believe it or not, inflation and slow an already weakening economy. Does he know something that the president and his team doesn't realize yet?
Yes, the United States economy is now officially in a recession. Economists will say 60% of this and that. You can ask any CEO, they're operating today because of the uncertainty created by Donald Trump and this bizarre nature of declaring that any trade deficit with any country is a loser. That is not true. America can run trade deficits, and let's separate out allies and enemies. China's an enemy. I've been talking about it for 20 years. We need to not trade with them. We should have built it up over 10 years and cut them out. But then you have to go back to your allies, and you can't treat your allies like your enemies. There are many reasons why the United States would run a trade deficit with any single country. One would simply be, you'd learn it in Economics 101, the law of comparative advantage. I'm wearing a tie made in Vermont, but they didn't get the cotton out of Vermont. They got it out of another country and made it. My suit's made in New York, but they didn't get the wool. The wool was made somewhere else. Gitman Brothers made my shirt. The law of comparative advantage says that they didn't make the cotton that went into the shirt. So we set this up a long time ago with our allies. And so because most Americans don't understand that if we don't stay the world's reserve currency, all this ends. We borrow at a relatively low rate because we're the world's reserve currency. Trump is trying to end that. We have a low savings rate in this country, so we have to get investments from outside the country. We should try to change that. But the big mistake is going after $85 trillion of people are outside the country when we have a $30 trillion economy. Go after one country if you want, Donald Trump. But the thought process that by itself a trade deficit with your ally is bad, and you combine that with the fact, just take aluminum in Canada. They make it with running water. We get 65% of our aluminum from this one place in Canada, and they're not going to send it in a while. They're going to send it somewhere else, even if these tariffs don't exist. This gig is ended, which has always benefited America with our allies, because Trump, a narcissist, not only has no friends, he has no countries as friends today. This is a complete disaster, as you can see from the stock market, from both sides economists. You can see it from everybody, Armstrong. This is leading to a recession that we won't be able to get out of if we don't stop this now. In 3 or 4 weeks, you're not going to have cars on Ford lots. And you're going to have layoffs that already started with Stellantis last week. They're going to continue. And the economy is going to head straight down.
You know, Tyler O'Neill, you speak with many small business owners, and they're scared to death. They're adjusting. They're being impacted. They believe that their businesses could be wiped out. And so, you know, you ask the question, well, who's President Trump listening to? Who has his ear on the tariffs? And believe it or not, he's listening to his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and the billionaire who's built successful businesses and has convinced the president that he's on the right track every time the economy has collapsed. I mean, listen, we saw it came back after the pandemic, it came back after 1987. But what's different this time, they're saying, is, Tyler, this is self-inflicted. This is a watershed moment. It feels different this time. You say what?
There's a lot going on with these tariffs. One aspect of it, President Trump has long believed, he's long campaigned on and talked about bringing tariffs to bear. So I think we have to put this in the general context of what Trump has always said. And he has always said he trusts tariffs. Now, we will see what the results are. He has achieved some success at bringing countries to the table, but this is a broad tariff, obviously. And it's going to be interesting. I think he might be shifting a little bit. I might expect him to shift the tariffs toward a more reciprocal status. And because unfortunately he focused on trade deficits as opposed to just reciprocal tariffs with this first big announcement. I think reciprocal tariffs make some degree of sense, especially when it comes to trying to find fair trade, free trade between countries. And other countries have, as President Trump says, taken advantage of the United States for far too long. One of the big weaknesses of this round of tariffs, though, is that they're not really as strong against China as you might expect. If you look at, it's a 10% tariff across the board, higher than that for China, but less even on that sheet than he said China's tariffs are against us. And China has often been abrogating our intellectual property rights. So I think President Trump has a lot of leeway that he could go against China. And if he goes more heavily against China and a little bit less heavily with our allies, as others were talking about, I think he could make this tariff move more effective.
Marcia, I want to take from Tyler's comments about the president and China, because I heard the president say that, he's extended the TikTok deal for 75 days. And, he really wants to have Panama as a part of the United States. But there's a thorn in his side, and it's called China. Now, but the president did say, maybe if he reduced the tariffs on China. They will allow an American minority buyer, owner, a part owner of TikTok, and he wants to get them out of Panama because he feels they're a threat. So is the president, by his willingness, and let me just tell you something, TikTok is a bad idea. It's spy weaponry, okay? And the Chinese are manipulating the president. Now the president's human. He's not perfect now. He can have some blind spots. Let's be clear here. I know everybody wants to believe the art of the deal. The president is a deal maker. It doesn't matter what he says going into the room. What matters is what happens inside that room and the deal they strike, and that becomes the deal of the day when he comes out of that room. Marcia.
Well, I think really China has us in a soft rock and a soft, hard place, but they're rocks in a hard place nonetheless. As it comes to TikTok, you're absolutely right. When we're talking about the possibility of who gets to buy it and based upon our influence on that purchasing, then we look at the breach of security, as you stated, which is damaging. Is it more damaging than an economic downfall with the possible stronger tariffs? But when you also look at what has happened in Panama for China actually halting that, I saw that as a, using an analogy of chess, sort of a great chess move, because you had immediately BlackRock jumping in, wanting to buy the ports. So that can impact that sort of trade sort of thing in some form of fashion as well. But it's really still unforeseen. I think that the gentlemen who are on this show with us today can speak more to it. But I think that, first of all, how can somebody be our biggest enemy? As someone said, my shirt is made in the United States, but the cotton is from somewhere else. Everything that I picked up is made in China, just about. Even luxury goods are now made in China. They own a lot of our acres of our lands here in America. So how much of an enemy really are they, and how much leeway we give them to be this economical enemy, so to speak, and this geopolitical threat based upon our other trade relationships with our allies as well?
There are immediate effects of the new U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods for American manufacturers. And we're going to stay with tariffs. This is an important topic. So Marcia, Steve, and Tyler, hold your voices, and we'll be back. Before I get to the U.S. tariffs, Marcia did say that some of our panelists could probably better comment about China and TikTok and the Panama Canal. So let me just give Steve a stab at the fact that the potential risk of saving TikTok, what it exposes us to, inappropriate content, security breaches, manipulating our kids, our children. Spying on, every time you turn around, whether it's Governor Catherine Hochul's office, she has a Chinese spy, the military has a Chinese spy, they're everywhere. I'm not saying that all Chinese are spies, but I gotta tell you something. They overwhelm our infrastructure, and they're very good at it. Steve.
On the two separate questions, TikTok is operating illegally. The Justice Department that is subservient to President Trump just issued a letter, we won't prosecute you, Apple Computer. The Supreme Court ruled on this. Congress passed it. It needs to be closed down as of now. There's no extension given. The president's violating the law, but no one seems to care. When it comes to China in general, yes, that's why we shouldn't be trading them. We should build up a 5-year plan because they do control our prescription drugs, Armstrong. They control a lot of things that they could shut down right now. But we've got to get them out of our way because their stated goal is to be the world superpower. If people think that's a good idea, I'm in the wrong country. Now you get the Panama, great idea. We cannot have China on either side of the Panama Canal. We've got to get it back. I'm happy for the Senate to vote back on a violation of a treaty and take back the Panama Canal. I think it was the worst decision we ever made. But we've got to bring back the Monroe Doctrine. That means every one of our enemies, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and communist China especially, you stay out of this hemisphere. That's ours. Get out and start with an easy victory in the Panama Canal. But China, all Chinese students in our country should be going home. They have to spy, or they can't, or their families will be harmed. We have to get rid of them owning land and owning companies in this country. It has to start. But first start, Trump is on the right track with trade policy with communist China, but he's on the wrong track with all these other countries that are our allies, because they're going to find a way around America.
We've got to stop them from buying our farmland. We've got to stop them from buying our pristine real estate in places like New York, D.C., California. We got to stop. So, Tyler, talk about what are the immediate effects of the new U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods for American manufacturing, and how might consumers, as you explain this, feel the impact of these tariffs in their daily purchases?
Yeah, I think President Trump has made no bones about the fact that these tariffs are going to have short-term pain, as he calls it. We're going to have to see how long that pain will last. Tariffs, to be fair, though, especially in the case of China, tariffs make a great deal of sense. Not only has China been, as we've been discussing here, trying to infiltrate various different American institutions, from our elementary and high schools to our colleges and universities, and then of course also by buying up our land, by having Chinese nationals around these military bases. There are so many questions that are naturally rising from China's activities in the United States. So I think it is long past time, but there's also the issue of the way that China abuses our intellectual property rights. And this is another aspect of the whole situation where I think President Trump could ground even more tariffs in the fact that China is violating our rights to intellectual property. And so China is our number one geopolitical rival. And we have to make no bones about that. And yes, they make a lot of products that they send over here. Not all of those are necessarily positive. We also have to look and see how they're able to get those costs so low. It's partially because they're stealing our plans and making copies and then sending them to us and undercutting our own producers. So there is a complicated cost-benefit ratio here. And when it comes to tariffs on countries around the world, one of the big things is we want to address when there are these non-reciprocal situations where some other country is taking advantage of us. But we also have to look at China as the threat that it is. And I think tariffs are one of the many ways that we can address that threat.
Marcia, what does the president mean when he tells us that his administration is negotiating directly with Iran regarding their nuclear program, their nuclear weapon system?
That's another closeted kind of conversation. It has all kind of sort of explosive possibilities, because we had that conversation about Iran during the Obama administration, which did not work well, right? We know that everything right now is literally on fire within the whole Middle East, and that Iran is really, even though we're looking at what's happening in Gaza and in Israel, that the real, I think, TNT for this administration is Iran. So whatever he's trying to do with them as far as conversation and ease into some sort of deal should be not considered that it's going to be a great outcome for us, because they've been able to last so long based upon the money that we have been able to allow them to build. So that would be another sort of a surprise to us once those conversations come out. We don't have enough information, because one moment we want to bomb them and the next moment we're sitting with them. We can't coddle and then condemn them at the same time. So we have to see what kind of middle-of-the-road conversation the president gives us to having a real informed conversation. But I think it's one to which he will definitely be walking on poppy seeds very lightly, not rice paper, so to speak. on this particular issue, because we just don't know how well can you trust someone that you say is your enemy, and how is this country called Iran not an enemy to other parts of the world? It becomes very complex. And I think that one thing I want to say has nothing to do with the conversation. One thing we're learning with this Trump administration, that we're all getting a schooling that we did not get in grade school, not in high school, and surely not in university levels. We're all are informed. I used to always say that our domestic policies often usurp our domestic lifestyles, our domestic policies. That may not be accurate, but we definitely see the impact of all of our geopolitical impact upon our domestic lives today. So it's no hiding. One administration was introvert. This is in your face. It is an extrovert. So everybody's taking notes, and it does look like a big puzzle. But I'm hoping that one day, for the sake of the consumers, which we have not talked about in this whole trade war, and what it means for them at the grocery store, and what does it mean for farmers, what does it mean for possible manufacturing, people who had manufacturing deals that are being cut out because of, also, while we're talking about tariffs, we have to also look at what are the cuts going on in this country as well, that's undermining a lot of our own progress inside.
So, Tyler, Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu all of a sudden had to come to Washington, and he met with the president. And in a nod to the president, Netanyahu pledges to eliminate Israel's trade surplus with the United States. Even during his visit, Trump did not give Netanyahu a break on tariffs, despite his visit. Tyler?
Yeah, I'm not entirely certain what the end game is here. I think President Trump is trying to show strength, but the situation right now with Israel, particularly, I think when Netanyahu is coming here, we know that President Trump is starting to negotiate. You know, this is not direct talks with Iran. These are indirect talks that they're going into soon. And there's talk of a big strike against Iran. All of this is in context, and I'm not entirely sure what the president is going for with these tariffs with Netanyahu. I think that he probably will reconsider after Netanyahu's offer, but maybe the president doesn't want to telegraph weakness. That said, I feel like we haven't heard the end of this story. So
are you saying that Netanyahu was a tariff prop today? The president strictly had him here and sent a message about tariffs, that somehow or another he was getting countries to capitulate in terms of, because he understands that he's having an issue with the optics, particularly when you get Elon Musk condemning his boss. Well, Elon Musk, you got the GOP coming out forcibly, pushing back on the president.
I mean, so it's interesting the way that these things have been, magnified. I think Elon Musk attacked Howard Lutnick in a small way on X, and everyone's saying, "Oh, this is the big battle of the century between Elon Musk and Donald Trump."
No, Elon Musk was sending a message about tariffs. No, that's what he was saying. It was clear what he was doing, right, Steve? It was just about tariffs.
Well, Elon Musk over the weekend said that he wanted a free trade zone with Europe.
Zero.
and have zero tariffs on either side. Listen, President Trump is on the wrong side of history when it comes to allies. The problem, and going back earlier, who has the ear of President Trump? Nobody, folks, nobody. They are just servile and sycophants because they want to be in the job. Lutnick will be thrown out if he doesn't agree. He said our trade war with Canada was over fentanyl. It's a joke. The Treasury Secretary keeps saying everything's going to be okay. Lutnick, he knows it's not going to be okay. He wants 3% economic growth. We're going to have negative economic growth. He wants 3 million more barrels per day produced in America in oil. We're having less because oil's going down because we're having a recession. And he wants a debt to GDP running at 3%. It's going to be 9%, folks. It's not 3. It's -3, 0, and 9. And it's going to be a disaster. Everybody in business seems to know this, but people are too scared to tell the president. That's the problem.
You know, I know, Tyler, and we're so thankful that you were able to join us, because I know you got to go. Marcia and Steve stays with us. I want to give you your final comments on this or something else that you think that's important that we should be discussing tonight.
Well, I think as President Trump has said, he's even acknowledged there's going to be some pain with this. I think we have to see where the markets go. The main problem is that there is this uncertainty. And I know, President Trump has his goal with tariffs, and we're going to see whether he's changing. I know he's telegraphing strength with Netanyahu. I'm not sure.
I want to tell you this. You have a whole different body language and energy about the president's tariffs tonight. Normally when you're on here, you're gun-ho for the president, but obviously something has changed. You're more cautious tonight, and it seems as though that you have had to think about this, that maybe we need Congress to step in to make sure that the president has checks and balance, like what the courts are doing. It's time that Congress does its job, Tyler. I think that's where you're a little more subdued tonight. I think it's good for journalism. I think it's very good. And you're not disagreeing with me, so I'm on point. So I'll leave it at there. We're going to say goodbye to you. We're going to come back with Steve and Marcia, and Duvalier Malone will join us, ANC member. And don't go away. Hold your powder. Keep it dry. We're just warming up.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. One of the debates that the president has been having is the fact who has the authority to deport what he deems to be a threat to the American way of life. We know the stories of airplanes taking out gang members and judges asking that you turn that aircraft around. And now we see what's going on right here in Maryland with an El Salvadorian who was deported, and yet the court has says he's done no wrong. And they asked him, the president, to bring him back. Well, the president has finally did what we assumed he was due. He took his case to the Supreme Court because he wants the Supreme Court to rule on whether he has that authority or not. And let me tell you this, the United States Supreme Court today temporarily halted a judge's order requiring President Trump to return by the end of this day that Salvadoran man who the government has acknowledged was in error deported to El Salvador. Now, Chief Justice John Roberts, acting on behalf of the court, paused the order by U.S. District Judge Paul Exenes that the administration return Kilmar Garcia by the end of the day. And in response to a lawsuit filed by the man and his family challenging the legality of his deportation. Let me tell you, folks, This is important. And it will have grave ramifications of whether the president has the power and can the courts intervene to stop him. Duvalier Malone, an ANC commissioner-elect, you're joining us. What are your thoughts on, and the court is giving the president a week to make his case?
Yeah, I think, when we look at the Supreme Court, I think this administration is using the Supreme Court. We know that they are all over the place. They have no respect for the judicial branch of government. And so I think the goal of this administration is to move in chaos, get it to the Supreme Court. And we know that the Supreme Court now, in my opinion, is not a nonpartisan court, Strong. I believe that
what are you basing it on that a biased court?
So when we look at the Supreme Court, when they gave Donald Trump a pass on the immunity, I believe that started the process. No one is above the law. And to sit a presidency where the president has immunity, it opens the door now for all kind of, illegal acts. We see now the president is having sponsorships to come to the Easter egg hunt, right? Where is the...
So you're already saying, what you're saying is the Supreme Court is in the tank, the decision's already made, they're going to side with Trump.
Absolutely.
But Marcia, that has not been the trajectory of this Supreme Court. This is why Amy Coney Barrett has been lambasted. Judge Roberts and other rulings that went against the president sided with the liberal court. So whatever Duvalier is reading, it's not consistent with the rulings of the court. Marcia? Why am I not hearing Marcia?
I said this kind of underscores the importance of adhering to the protocols and ensuring that individuals' rights are protected, especially in the immigration proceedings. First of all, we have to talk about we have no really immigration cohesiveness as far as the rights of immigrants coming or going to deported or not. And I think that was really the fault line with all of these things that are happening in the United States based upon past administrations around immigration laws. But you also have the Alien Act of 1768 that try to put into alignment just what are presidential rights and expediting deportation as well that has to be looked into. But I think for this particular case that is proven or is trying to be proved that this person was deported illegally and that the president, though he's an executive branch, cannot ignore what the judicial branch is telling him. And that is that this is wrongfully deported this man based upon the legal case that was set before them. So this, first of all, goes back to where we have a strong immigration law, where we adhere to it to everybody, regardless of where they come from. And I think that is the fray that is unraveling all of this that we're getting to this juncture today. And again, what I reiterated earlier is that we're learning more about these laws that Trump, because of Trump's actions, right? That we have to pay attention to it because it's not just about this one individual. Scores of individuals are being deported. Are those deportations in mass, like with Sudan? That has been brought up that one person is responsible, so everybody has to go. Visas are being halted. All of this is a mess because we never had a cohesive or refused to have a well-founded follow-through, regardless of who is in office, on our immigration laws and surrounding deportations, and also who is allowed to come into this country honestly, legally, and the result of them being here on this soil.
Steve, keep in mind when Donald Trump was lambasting the judges for their removal and biases, Supreme Court Justice John Roberts immediately issued a repudiation to this administration and cautioned them. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
And good for our Supreme Court Justice John Roberts. My personal feeling is that it's a very hard path to the Supreme Court. They do the best job they can, and we should all be very respectful of their rulings. They don't go in my favor or what I think is right all the time. In this particular case, here's the problem with Donald Trump. We know he was sent to El Salvador, Mr. Garcia, in error. We all know this. What Donald Trump cannot do is say, I made an error. They made an error, right? He can't do it about people talking about giving away strike plans against the Houthis. He can't say anybody made an error. None of them can. It'd be easy to say we made an error, bring them back. But no, what does our country do now? We send down the former governor of South Dakota, and she stands in front of all these people who are half naked to do what? Why is she there? And by the way, what we talked about in the first half of this show is total failure by Donald Trump in causing recession. But his success on stopping illegal immigration versus what Biden was up to, which is letting everybody come in, it's never talked about. And so Donald Trump doesn't even know how to declare victory. And what we have to stop him, we have to all condemn any president who's calling for either the resignation, the impeachment of a judge who simply rules like in a different direction. I mean, this is why this is why one of the big things happen in America is the lack of faith in our public institutions. When it ruled, I say, well, I guess they didn't agree with me on whatever it might be. Or for years this happened. Now, so most of the time, since I'm a very conservative guy, I feel like, oh, they're ruling in what I think should be. I'm sure John Roberts and the rest of them up there will rule fairly in what they think is right. I think the guy should just be brought back, one guy, even though I'm totally in favor of stopping illegal immigration.
You know, it's fascinating, Duval. The Secretary of Health and Human Services has finally said, that the answer to measles is that kids need to be vaccinated. Why was that so important, Duvalier?
Because now we see the outbreak in Texas and over 400 outbreaks, and he attended a funeral over the weekend there in Texas. And so I think when we see young children dying in this country to measles, and we know that the measles vaccination is 97% accurate and it can be prevented, I think that he is moving in the right direction so that we can make sure that we are saving the lives of so many young vulnerable kids. I don't think students and kids should be involved in between this political weaponization. I do know that after the funeral, the Secretary of HHS also started to also engage in the vitamin A theory again. We know that the vitamin A therapy is only supposed to be done with a physician and all the right blood work, et cetera. So I'm hoping that the HHS Secretary stays on this particular talking point, and so that we don't see more young, vulnerable kids dying there in Texas. And not just in Texas, but across the country. We don't need a pandemic on something that has been scientifically proven to be preventable.
So in light of the recent measles outbreak, let me stick with you, Duvalier. What are the potential consequences of increased vaccine hesitancy if we don't get everybody on the same page? And how significant is the role of public figures in shaping public health behaviors and the beliefs?
Absolutely. So we know that in so many different communities, especially those vulnerable communities that we see in Texas, that they look to leadership. They believe in what leadership say. And so that's why it was breaking news when the HHS Secretary was encouraging vaccinations. We know that prior to that, there were some skeptics there. So I think it's important. Public policy is shaped by our leaders, right? To really back the scientific proof. And also, Armstrong, in this particular conversation, it has been scientifically proven that this vaccination worked. It has worked for years. And so this is something that we don't need to play politics with. We need to encourage these school districts to ensure that their students are vaccinated, so that we can make sure that we are educating students and not burying students for something that is so preventable, right? And I think that's important.
Marcia, discuss the recent reports of the downsizing within HHS and the motivations behind these changes. And let's be clear, It's not what Bobby Kennedy is doing. It's what the White House is demanding that he does, laying off 10,000 people. That's huge.
Well, it's sort of oxymoronic for him to switch his anti-vax to vaccinations as regards to the measles, right? And just a side point, it's not just the vaccinations. Well, we have to make sure that, as we did find out post the COVID vaccinations, that there were some ingredients put in there that were not savory, that may have made people ill. So it's not just the vaccination itself. And as far as the outbreak, it wasn't as if it was 1,010. God forbid that any child's life is lost. So I'm glad that they are looking at that.
Well, it sounds it sounds as though you're in agreement with Secretary Kennedy. Marcia?
No. So what I'm saying is that I'm glad that we're doing this, but at the same time, you can't say that we're preparing to do this or needing to have a vaccination, but then you're cutting down the staff. Who's going to handle this emergency? You can't call upon a few people to do the task that would take to cover our country, especially the people that we want, the children that need to be vaccinated. You can't downsize at this time, making this great switch. It's the turnaround that you have made. You can't do it on a dime. We need the whole dollar behind it, and we need the manpower behind it too, because if not, then it would be ineffective. So you can say, okay, I've changed the course and direction of my ideas around the measles vaccination, but okay, now we have hundreds of thousands of children needing it, but we don't have 100 people to administer it, to follow up on it, to make sure that the inoculations are right, that everything is done properly. You need more manpower, not a reduction of it at this particular time.
And we will be back, because this is truly your voice and your future.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Steve, what impact might a reduced Health and Human Services workforce have on the management of public health emergencies, as Duvalier and Marcia discussed? And how can the public health officials combat misinformation and rebuild trust in vaccines?
Well, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at the top of it, I really don't know how you're going to combat the misinformation. The man's an anti-vaxxer and believes that measles cause autism. I mean, he's made so many wacky statements. But let's get back to this department is extraordinarily important. And yes, I believe even Elon Musk said it, that probably every department in the federal government, not our fighting forces and so forth, could be cut back by 10% and be more efficient. I only had a company where I was the president of 2,000 people, but we did that kind of stuff there. The worst hire maybe in the history that I've seen so far in 20 years in the federal government is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Folks, he fired 10,000 people and realized he had to hire back 2,000 of them and said something along the lines of, this was always going to happen, it's part of the plan. There's no businessman in the United States of America who would ever do it this way.
But Steve, in all fairness, this is what the White House told him he had to do. And Steve, and even he said against the administration, I agonize doing this. Oh, come on, let's be fair here now to Bob.
He should go department by department, figure out who he really needs.
Steve, it's what all the agencies are doing. It's coming from DOJ and the White House. Okay?
True.
Okay.
But then again, don't be a sycophant. Don't do it. Don't lay off people when I've never heard. If you ask Jack,
so you would just walk away. You should say, "Fire me. I can't do your bidding."
That's what he should say.
Is that what you would do?
That's what I would do. That's why I'm not there.
That's easier said than done.
No, it's not.
But
you
it
just
is.
Do it. You've done it your entire life.
They really believe they can make change. Listen, You got someone that wants to reduce the size of the federal government. If you cannot serve and carry out the president's ambitions, then don't agree to be his cabinet secretary.
That's right.
That's it.
But I could get rid of 10,000 people in that department, but not hire back 2,000 because they didn't spend any time figuring out who they really needed. They've done this department by department with Doge. They've had to hire back people who had nuclear secrets. It's haphazard. And it's giving the American people the signal that these people don't know what they're doing.
It's chaotic. They don't know bureaucracy. They don't know government, Marcia. It is chaotic.
It is. And it doesn't need to be.
It is.
But I want to switch here a minute with the time left, because I have been following this recent book, Fighting, by the two journalists, and talking about former President Obama, Duvalier, and how he never felt that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, could win the White House. He strongly felt they needed an open primary. He and Nancy Pelosi were on board together, but yet Jim Clyburn and others realized where Obama was going and decided to go out and endorse Kamala, and also convince then President Trump, Biden, to do the same. And the former president saying it was just a disaster. He never thought she had a chance of winning, and that the party would be catastrophic for the party. And that's exactly what has happened. Your thoughts, Duvalier?
I really think, Armstrong, this is a distraction. We are starting to see Democratic strategies write books and books. What is wrong with the Democratic Party is no one is talking to the everyday people. They're not talking to people who are struggling with their health care. They're not talking to people who have been unemployed for years in rural America. They're not talking with people who are struggling every single day to meet the necessities that they need. The Democratic Party is coming out to these elites, and it's time for us to go and talk to the people. And so I totally understand the process in which everything happened. There were a lot of moving pieces. So I do believe that there were conversations behind the scenes about should there be an open convention, et cetera. But what we really should do is start talking to those people that we went to see in those beauty salons, in those barbershops. Have we went back to visit them? That is the Democratic Party issue now. We see AOC and Bernie Sanders are packing out stadiums. That's what the Democratic Party should be. We shouldn't be here reliving 2024. 2024 was not political strategy. It was political fear of change, fear of bold leadership. And so I think we got to go and talk to the people and let the people craft our message moving forward as a Democratic Party. If we do not, then I don't think that we're going to win like we think we're going to win. We got to go and we got to talk to the people.
Marcia, how might the former president's influence shape the party's strategy leading up to the next election? And what are the potential benefits and drawbacks of a former president playing an active role in party politics? And I do think Duvalier makes an excellent point. They have lost touch with their base. They're not relatable to their base. They become more elitist than the Republican Party, and that is it. They do not talk to the people that matter anymore. I think he makes an exceptional point here.
The reason why even my home city of Chicago went red, which was an amazing thing to see happen, is because the Democrats refused to have that common touch to speak to the everyday man. I don't know what castles that they were living in. I would say that First Avenue, First Capitol Street up here in D.C. is not a moat and there's no castle on the hill, but the people have felt like they were serfs. They felt like if they could not reach out to the government or they wasn't listening to them, they were being talked to. And I think that that was very detrimental. I think that there was a spill of coronation, not only around the vice president becoming the first woman president, but the Democrats themselves, that they had forged this relationship that you could throw out little pandering words and slogans and they would be okay with the people, but the people were not okay. They have forgotten about the folks that I see homeless every day, mothers changing their children's clothes in storage places and they forgot about the people who were vets, right? I mean, they totally lost the human touch as far as that's concerned. And they were more concerned about saving of the party rather than the people to whom the party was comprised of. And I think their tactics too were not as great as they should have been, because you had the rallies and you open up with culture rather than substance, right? We're not monolithic. And for me to have seen the woundedness of Black women who were supposed to have led this and who did lead it, to have this great loss and see their suffering, and still after the 2008 results, that we still are not doing the job that we should do on the streets around our children, our communities, and having a great leadership. That would be the head of 2008 to me, not so much the party, but the people who themselves within the community having an avenue to talk to the politicians and not being fussed at, dictated to, and having those sort of primary and meetings that we refuse to have during the 2004 elections, not holding the primaries and having conversations.
So Steve,
you would have known what the people felt if you had those conversations.
So Steve, people are losing their way of life because of these unprecedented losses on the stock market. Businesses are collapsing. This is impacting Trump's base as well. Is it right? Is it a gamble? And we have about 30 seconds that Trump is willing to risk it all, the White House and Congress, on tariffs?
Trump doesn't care about you, me, or the guy behind the tree.
Okay.
And that's just the way, he's a narcissist. But here's what I would say. Listen to, and I'm not a Democrat. Listen, you can keep talking like that in generic words, or you can take 7 things out of the Democratic Party. You can take this transgender stuff and throw it away, right? You can listen to Obama, who's a really smart man, and get specific issues. I'll give you another one. When the president goes golfing, tell every Democrat to go where those fallen soldiers landed and show a different view that the president's golfing, and you be the Speaker of the Minority Leader of the House, Minority Leader of the Senate. Democrats, go and do these things and get your base back, because you've got to take specific things that the American people will not accept. Governor of Maine, they don't accept men swimming against women as one big thing. You've got to get rid of it and get back to issues that matter to working class people. You failed in that. And when you get it back, you will crush them next time, because the country's going to be in a recession. I shouldn't say this. I grew up I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican, but stop the generic talk. Find 7 issues, take them out, find 3 to run on. It's the economy, stupid. Remember that one? And go for it, and you'll win. That's it.
Duval, it's always a pleasure to see you, my brother.
Thank you.
Always. Marcia, it's always a pleasure. You know how I feel about you, Steve. You're my brother. I know Tyler O'Neill had to leave. I always appreciate a civil, respectful, especially where we learn something. Because if someone is not learning when we're all together, then somebody's not necessary, if everybody agreed.